having us, and thank you so much for making this available online. I've got a presentation to share, so I will try and put this up now, but I believe I don't need to introduce myself or Irene again. I believe you did that, Louis, bear with me. Right.
Okay.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
Marvelous. So, as I think you've already said, we are delighted to tell you about children and young people's reading in 2024, which is a report we've just published last week. So this is all new to everyone, including us. It is based on data from, hang on, it doesn't allow me to continue. Let me just do this again.
Don't fret.
Right, let's try this one. Right, perfect. Sorry about this. Before we give you a little bit of insight into children and young people's reading in 2024, I thought I would tell you a little bit about the survey that this data comes from. So we've been asking children and young people about their reading and writing annually since 2010. We asked them the degree to which they enjoy reading and writing, how often they read and write, what they read and write, how confident they are. Some of the questions that we use to track children and young people's reading go all the way back to 2005, when we first asked children and young people about their reading enjoyment, their reading habits, and their reading attitudes in a large-scale survey. We publish data on our surveys in reports throughout the year. So for example, in June this year, we published our report on writing, which showed that children and young people's writing, particularly the writing that they do in their free time, is at crisis point. As I said, last week, we published our reading trend report, which explored not only children and young people's reading in 2024, but also for those for whom we had information going back all the way to 2005, how reading, enjoyment, behaviors, and attitudes have changed for 8 to 18-year-olds in the past 20 years. So what did we find? Well, very much like our research on writing, we found that reading enjoyment is at crisis point. Now, for us, that was really not anything new, because we said the same thing last year in 2023, when we found that only 2 in 5, so 43% of children and young people aged 8 to 18 told us that they enjoyed reading in their free time. So, but that was then, and this is now. So this graph, and I do apologize for the density of that graph, gives you the levels of reading enjoyment, i.e. the degree to which children and young people enjoy reading either very much or quite a lot over the past 19 years. So all the way from 2005 to right at the bottom bar, 2024. Now it is a complex graph, but there are 3 things I think I want you to take away from it. One is that in 2024, only 1 in 3 children told us that they enjoy reading in their free time. The second one is that when we compare this to what happened 19 years ago, we actually see that there's been a 16.8 percentage point drop in the number of children who told us that they enjoy reading, or in other words, that is a change of 33%. So we saw a decrease of 33% in the number of children who enjoyed reading. So effectively, we lost 1 in 3 children on the reading journey over the past 19 years. And then if that's not bad enough, equally concerning is the really large drop we've seen in the past 12 months alone, where we saw a decrease in levels of reading enjoyment in free time of 8.8 percentage points, so from 43.4 to 34.6, which again, if we want to look at this differently, is a decrease of 20%, so 1 in 5 children. We lost 1 in 5 children over the past 12 months. Now, there are various drivers for this drop. Our survey doesn't really ask children and young people why they don't enjoy reading, i.e. we don't have the reason for this drop quite as much as we would like, but we can look at certain demographics that we've equally tracked over time. And I hand over to Irene, who will talk you through some of the findings from this year.
Do you want to go on to the next slide, please, Christina?
Sure.
Thank you. So yes, I'm just going to talk about some of the findings from this year in a little more detail. So another very dramatic change that we've seen in 2024 is a tripling of the gap in reading enjoyment by gender in the UK. We know more girls than boys generally tend to tell us they enjoy reading. And in this graph, the green line represents boys, the blue line represents girls. And you can see that more girls than boys said they enjoy reading consistently over time. The blue line is always longer, and there's never a year in which as many boys as girls tell us that they enjoy reading. However, we got closer than ever to closing this gender gap in reading enjoyment in 2023, last year, where you can see the lines are quite close. But unfortunately, that wasn't because more boys were saying they enjoyed reading. It was because fewer girls were telling us they enjoyed reading last year. And then if you look at this year, right at the very bottom, you can see that boys really have overtaken girls on a race to the bottom this year. There's now a 12.3 percentage point gap between boys and girls' reading enjoyment levels, driven mainly this year by this big drop in boys' reading enjoyment, the green line there. Next slide, please, Christina. Thank you. And another interesting feature that our data allows us to look at is differences by age group. And in this graph, the green line is our youngest age group that we look at. That's children aged 8 to 11. And then the blue line is your 11 to 14-year-olds. And the orangey yellow line is 14 to 16-year-olds. And you can see, just glancing at the graph, that many more of the youngest children, so the green line, say that they enjoy reading compared with young people aged 11 to 16, the blue and yellows. Indeed, in 2024, we can see that almost twice as many 8 to 11s said they enjoyed reading compared with 11 to 16-year-olds. But at the same time, we can see the green line, the 8 to 11s, has been quite wavy over the years. Technical term there, but the blue and yellow are much more consistent. So I think many people might expect teens, for example, to show more dramatic decreases in reading enjoyment with the march of technology, things like that. But up until this year, it hasn't really changed that much. And in fact, last year it was higher for 14 to 16s in 2023 than it was in 2005, which is quite surprising. And again, one of the benefits of having this long-term trend data for us. But these kinds of gains that we saw in the older age groups have been completely eroded this year, resulting in the lowest levels of enjoyment we've seen in older age groups for the last 19 years. So as you can see at the bottom there, the drop in reading enjoyment over the last year was most pronounced for those aged 11 to 14 and for those aged 14 to 16 compared with those aged 8 to 11. We've got another slide, Christina?
Do.
That's it. And the last group that we're going to look at is children who do and do not receive free school meals, which is what we mean by FSM in the title at the top there. This is a sort of imperfect way of looking at differences between children and young people from lower and higher income homes. Children from very low income homes can receive free school meals, and that's the green line on this slide. And the blue would be their children and young people from higher income backgrounds. And you can see that there's a bit of a difference in reading enjoyment by family income in most years across the, the last couple of decades, with slightly more children from the higher income homes, that's the blue line, saying that they enjoyed reading. However, there's almost no gap in 2024, right at the very bottom. But again, sadly, this wasn't because more children from lower income homes were saying they enjoyed reading, but it was rather because there was a bigger drop in reading enjoyment from children in higher income homes. Next slide, please, Christine. So to recap briefly, we can see reading enjoyment is at its lowest level in the UK for 19 years, with the biggest drops in the last year being among boys and older age groups. But why does it matter if children enjoy reading or not? I know this is something that's been picked up earlier in the conference as well. But one of the big narratives in England recently has been how well our 10 and 15-year-olds are performing on the international stage in reading assessments like PIRLS and PISA. So there is a camp that thinks as long as children can read, then enjoying reading is just a nice bonus. It's just a nice to have, perhaps not as important. But of course, these things are interconnected. And if you can't read for pleasure. But if you don't see reading as something you love to do or you enjoy doing, you may therefore not choose to read. And we don't just want all children to be able to read. Of course, we want that. We want capable readers, but we do want them to actually read as well. And as you can see here, our survey allows us to see if there are any links between enjoying reading and choosing to read in free time. We did see a remarkable 8 times as many children and young people who said they enjoyed reading in their free time, told us that they read daily in their free time compared with those who didn't enjoy reading, 48.2% versus 5.9%. So I think that's a really important statistic to be aware of. We also had a subset of children for whom we had reading assessment data, and we could see that children and young people who enjoyed reading, a smaller sort of sample there, they had higher average standardised reading scores than children and young people who didn't enjoy reading. But just like life, it isn't all about attainment or performance, it's more than that. And I think we can sometimes forget in all the academic studies linking reading for pleasure with things like lifetime earnings and what have you, that reading for pleasure has a wide range of immediate benefits for children and young people. So, for example, more than half of the children that that answered the survey told us they read because it helped them to relax. Again, around half told them they read because it helps them to learn new things. 1 in 3 said it helped them to understand other people. And 1 in 4 said they read because it helped them learn more about issues and causes that they cared about. So for lots of reasons, it would seem like the world could be a better place if we all read more.
So 1 in 3 has been a wake-up call for not only our organization, but also our partner organizations working in the sector. There's also been a lot of interest internationally in our findings. But Jenny, what we've realized is that we alone, as the National Literacy Trust, even with the sort of direct partners that we're working with on a daily basis, with all of the teachers, with all of the parents, with all of the children and young people, we cannot do it alone. So we've set ourselves the target that we will be working with 1.5 million children from disadvantaged communities, because disadvantaged communities are at the heart of our organizational mission. So we want to work with that number and increase their reading for pleasure and to increase their reading confidence over the next 3 years. But actually, we have a curriculum review currently being undertaken by our government that's responsible for, or the department that's responsible for education in the current government. So actually, from our perspective, this report is quite key in helping to address wider questions around the importance of reading, both within the curriculum, but also in terms of our cultural issues and solutions. So we've called on the current government to create a task force, but not just working with the sort of the normal, what we would call culprits, i.e. the people, for example, school departments, but we would like to broaden this out to also bring in cross-sectorial interests. So anything from health to what other, I'm stumbling, Irene. You're on mute.
It's because I was coughing, apologies. Yeah, industry, we work with lots of businesses. We have a Vision for Literacy business pledge that involves more than 100 different organisations, ranging from accountancy to publishing, you name it. So we have lots of different partners who we like to involve in helping us address this challenge.
Thank you, Irene. I honestly just had a blank out there. So yes, actually, publishers are a very important puzzle piece to our surge to increase reading for pleasure nationally, but hopefully also internationally. And I think you can download the report. We've just talked about reading enjoyment, but actually the report covers so much more. We talk about daily reading, how that has changed over the past 19 years, again, looking at specific subgroups. We also explore reading motivations. Irene, as part of the benefits of reading, touched on that, but again, there are very, very many more reasons why children and young people engage with reading. As I said, we've published our findings on writing. We will publish findings on book ownership in the UK, because that's another thing that we're tracking. And even that report, which is full of information, is only the top of the iceberg. We asked so many more things that we simply cannot publish. But if there's ever any interest in, for example, finding out what children read, the genres, that's something we could potentially make available. And I think this sums up our whistle-stop tour of children and young people's reading in the UK.